As you know, today's speaker is Jamie Merisotis. And as some of you may already know, his work is especially relevant to this moment. So I think hearing his remarks today will be very timely. Just a little bit about Jamie. Since 2008, he has served as the president and CEO of the Lumina Foundation, a national private foundation which is based here in Indianapolis that focuses on opportunities for learning beyond high school that is available to all. Lumina's offices are located here in Indianapolis at BottleWorks, and alongside the national work that Lumina does, Luma also supports many civic initiatives right here in Indy, which we really appreciate. Jamie is a very familiar voice in the public conversation. He's frequently called on to help make sense of how education, work, and policy are evolving. And he is known for many writings. He appears regularly in the Washington Post, the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal. He's also a regular contributor to Forbes, and he's the author of 2 books, America Needs Talent and Human Work in the Age of Smart Machines. Earlier in his career, Jamie helped shape the policy landscape by co-founding the Institute for Higher Education Policy, a leading and bipartisan national commission focused on college affordability. And more recently, as technology and especially artificial intelligence reshapes how we learn and work, Jamie continues to advise these organizations that are grappling with those changes, and he brings a thoughtful, human-centered perspective to a very rapidly changing world. In addition to his national leadership, Jamie has extensive board experience in the U.S. and abroad, advising and serving organizations across education, workforce, and civic life. And he's no stranger to this organization where he previously led this board. I would be remiss if I didn't also thank him and say he is on the CICP board, and we're very grateful for his contributions there. So without further ado, please join me in welcoming today's featured speaker, Jamie Merisotis.
Thank you, Melina. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm just thrilled to be back here at the Economic Club of Indiana. As Melina said, I'm a former club president and speaker. I spoke actually back in 2015, which means I've been here for a very long time. And, I've really long admired the tradition that this organization represents, bringing together leaders from business, from government, from philanthropy, and education to wrestle with big ideas and practical challenges. And I think that tradition has never been more important than it is today. This afternoon, I want to explore a question that is on, I think, all of our minds. What does the rise of artificial intelligence mean for jobs in our economy, for higher education, and most importantly, for the people of Indiana and this country? As someone who spent much of my career at the intersection of education and work, and as Melina said, who wrote a book on human work and AI, I've been thinking about this moment for some time. 5 years ago, when that book was released, I wrote that work was changing in unprecedented ways as technology took over more and more of the tasks that people once performed. I was fortunate to have gotten a glimpse of the future as I did research for the book, but even then, I underestimated the speed of change. When personal computers were introduced, it took 20 years for half of US households to adopt them. Mobile phones reached that mark in 6 years. Generative AI has done it in 3. ChatGPT reached 100 million users in roughly 2 months. AI is no longer emerging, it's embedded. It's in our workplaces, in our classrooms, and in our daily lives. Stanford research shows that nearly 80% of organizations are already using AI in some part of their operations. Job postings that mention AI skills have surged more than 400% in the past 2 years. At the same time, the story is more nuanced than I think the headlines suggest. Adoption varies very widely by sector. An Indiana Chamber report estimated that less than 25% of work time in life sciences and just 18% in agriculture will experience significant automation in the near term. The widely reported decline in entry-level job postings since 2023 may reflect AI, but it also may reflect broader economic conditions. It's still too early to tell. Context matters, and if we step back, the debate itself actually sounds familiar. For all that's changed, the debate over the future of work today isn't a whole lot different than it was 5 years ago. On the one hand, we hear that AI is going to cause massive job loss, what I like to call the robot zombie apocalypse. On the other hand, many are convinced that technology's impact is overstated and that the AI bubble is going to burst any day. History, I think, suggests a more balanced view. Technology has always reshaped work, destroying some jobs, creating others, and transforming most. The key question is not whether change is coming, it's whether we will prepare people to thrive within it. Indiana's own story, I think, proves that we can. What drove our economy in the 19th century was agriculture. Indiana was a top 5 producer of both corn and hogs. In the early 20th century, Indiana was second only to Michigan in auto production. Today, we have the highest concentration of advanced manufacturing in the entire nation. Automotive is still a part of the mix, but so are aerospace and orthopedics. And while Indiana is still among the leaders in producing corn and soybeans, it's also a leader in life sciences, in transportation and logistics, and in the technology and data center industries. Each transformation rendered some jobs obsolete, but each time, Hoosiers adapted through new skills, new industries, and expanded education and training. Today, more Hoosiers are working than at any point in our entire history. The through line in that story, therefore, isn't technology, it's people. Work matters deeply to us as humans. It shapes our dignity, our sense of contribution, our identity. It's an essential part of who we are. Decades of survey research shows that even the lowest wage workers are willing to trade some money if it means that their work makes a difference. In an uncertain world, work anchors us. That's why this moment calls not for fear, but for focus. If AI can perform more and more of the routine and predictable tasks of work, then the value of distinctly human capabilities rises. Now, for fun, and for some fascinating insight, I recently asked AI itself, in the form of ChatGPT 5.2, which I use every day, about its own limitations. And here is how ChatGPT 5.2 responded to me. Quote, AI's limits include lacking true human-like understanding, creativity, empathy, and common sense, struggling with novel problems, context and bias in data, and preventing genuine intuition or wisdom beyond programmed patterns. AI struggles with novel problems and context. It operates within patterns. It doesn't possess purpose. In other words, it can simulate humanity, but it does not possess it. This is why we must focus on preparing people for human work, which is the work that only humans can do. Work rooted in compassion, in ethical judgment, creativity, collaboration, trust, and the ability to navigate complexity. We'll need to prepare for this new era of human work by developing our human capacities like problem solving and teamwork, genuine curiosity and humility, adaptability, and interpersonal communication. These are often somewhat dismissively labeled as soft skills, but I think we all understand they are anything but soft. I prefer to call them durable skills because they endure across technologies, industries, and decades. We all know that you can interact with a chatbot 24 hours a day, but when the stakes are high, you still ask for a human. Think about it in the context of healthcare. AI can identify anomalies in a medical scan, but only a trained clinician can guide a patient through a life-changing diagnosis with wisdom and empathy and the trust of the patient that they're treating. So the challenge before us, I think, is clear. How do we design an education and workforce system that prepares people not just to use AI, but to lead alongside it? Higher education, I think, is central to that answer. But we all know that in this moment, higher ed is facing a number of serious headwinds. These include a shrinking number of Americans under the age of 18, attacks on research, curricula, and campus speech, and growing skepticism over the value of a college education. A recent Pew survey says that over the past 12 years, the share of adults who say that a college education is very important dropped from 70% to 35%. At the same time, real-world behavior paints a more nuanced picture. Enrollment in four-year colleges and universities is actually increasing, not a big headline. And the share of adults with bachelor's degrees has grown steadily, suggesting that when faced with actual decisions, most people still see degrees and other credentials as valuable. In short, Americans largely still recognize the value of higher ed for themselves and their children, and in my view, they are correct to do so. Census Bureau data shows that households headed by a bachelor's degree holder earn a median income of $133,000, more than double the $58,000 for those led by someone with only a high school diploma. Over the past 2 decades, degree-holding households saw real incomes rise by 13%, while high school-only households saw no rise. The Cleveland Fed recently estimated that the college wage premium, which is 70% today, will be 76% in 2042. Of course, the rethinking we need to do is broader than four-year institutions. 40% of American undergraduates, some 8.5 million students, are enrolled in community colleges like our great Ivy Tech here in Indiana. The good news is that there's also a significant, though generally lower, wage premium for people with associate degrees and quality workforce credentials like certificates and certifications. The bad news is that while enrollment is actually up a little bit in four-year institutions, community college enrollment is still below its pre-COVID levels, primarily, we think, because of a stronger job market. So when it comes to the general value, of course higher education is worth it. That's been the case throughout our country's history, and the evidence is overwhelming that it's still the case. But the question is whether our system is evolving fast enough to meet the needs of today and tomorrow. High costs have put too many schools out of reach for many Americans. There are also legitimate concerns about misalignment with the job market, barriers to access, and perceived politicization. We've reached a point where we must rethink the fundamentals and accelerate progress towards something new and better for students and society. This will require a dramatic overhaul that recasts how we pay for and structure institutions and the system that supports them. This overhaul is a key part of Lumina Foundation's new national goal, which calls for 75% of adults in the U.S. labor market to have a college degree or other credential of value leading to economic prosperity by 2040. This goal recognizes both the higher need for skilled workers and it quantifies the payoff of education. And I think there'll be broad agreement in this room on the kinds of things that'll be needed to do to get there. Things like offering a wide range of higher ed courses that develop relevant future skills demanded by employers, and making college affordable and accessible for a diverse range of learners, and ensuring that learners become both great workers and active and engaged citizens. At the same time, I have no illusion that this kind of transformation will be easy. A redesigned system will have to engage today's students. The model designed for 18-year-olds attending full-time residential colleges no longer reflects reality today. 1/3 of today's students are 25 or older. Half are first generation. 80% work. 44% are financially independent of their parents. Meanwhile, some 50 million Americans have only a high school diploma, and more than 40 million have gone to college but never received a credential. What's encouraging is that in many states, including Indiana, we see adaptation taking place in real time. Along with reining in prices and expanding things like scholarships and need-based aid, more states are encouraging schools to look at options like 3-year degree programs and offer more flexible scheduling to meet the needs of today's learners. More states are creating real financial incentives for schools to partner with businesses to ensure they're teaching in-demand skills, and are using things like internships and apprenticeships and other programs to give their students entree into good jobs. Now, you'll note that our 2040 goal speaks to this idea of credentials of value. We're putting renewed emphasis on tying degrees and other credentials to return on investment, to good jobs, to more opportunities for further education, to community engagement in an increasingly disconnected world, and other measures of value. This means focusing not only on college degrees, but on high-quality workforce credential programs that are aimed at getting more people onto the ladder of opportunity to earn family-sustaining wages and build a more durable career path. Many states, including several that we work with at Lumina, are developing ways to make short-term workforce credential options easier to navigate, to assess, and to pay for, and are boosting in real time the investments in these programs. So reaching that 2040 goal will require affordability, it'll require flexibility, and it will require a stronger alignment with workforce needs. It'll require short-term credentials that truly deliver value. It will require transparency so that learners can see which programs lead to good jobs. And it will require collaboration between higher education and business at a scale that we have not yet achieved. This brings me to employers. For years now, we've heard about the skills gap, a misalignment of skills employers say they need with what colleges are providing students. Colleges are told they're not producing the right talent. Employers are told they're not clearly signaling their needs. The truth is, both sides need to do more. Employers need to do a better job of signaling exactly what skills they're looking for. Employers can also collaborate more closely with local institutions on aligning curricula with workforce needs through internships, through specialized training, and research. A key focus of the Central Indiana Corporate Partnership, for example, is connecting universities like Purdue and IU, Indiana State, Ivy Tech, and our many private nonprofit colleges with major employers for talent pipeline development. TechPoint reports that employers increasingly expect candidates to arrive with applied experience, like internships, apprenticeships, or real-world projects, but there simply aren't enough opportunities. In 2023, more than 8 million US students wanted to do an internship, but only about half of those actually could find internships to do. And unlike the rest of the industrialized world, the US has never really had a substantial apprenticeship model. This is in part due to the size and scale of our economy, but it's also true that while there's a nascent movement around what's called degree apprenticeships, the fact is they're hard to create and sustain. The work of the Indiana Career Apprenticeship Pathway Initiative seems like a promising way to get these ideas more into the DNA of both consumers and employers. As we head into a world where humans are increasingly working alongside technology, employers need to create more work-based learning opportunities. As AI's capabilities rapidly improve, we'll need workers with good judgment on how AI is deployed and whether its outputs are reliable and valuable. And that kind of knowledge is something people learn best from experience in the workplace. At the same time, with boomers and Gen Xers retiring and a smaller cohort of young people coming behind them, businesses are going to have to upskill the workers that they already have. You know, a human resource manager I was talking with recently put the challenge we face in simple yet stark terms. The workforce of the future is in the workforce right now. For all that business is already investing in training, it needs to invest even more in building both the technical skills and the human capabilities of incumbent workers. About half of businesses offer tuition assistance, but fewer than 5% of employees actually take advantage of it. Employers need to provide both tuition support and the time that their employees need to do the learning. And employers need to work with their employees not only to address short-term skill needs, but also to support a long-term learning plan for employees' ongoing education. These plans include the specific skills that an employee needs to learn for the increasingly human tasks and human AI collaboration that will be required of them while providing tuition assistance, childcare and transportation, and other supports that are associated with effective learning. The fact is, these kinds of investments in employee education and training aren't just good for workers, they're also good for the bottom line. Last year, Harvard Business Review reported that companies see a 17% increase in productivity and a 21% boost in profitability when employees receive targeted training. That's because training not only sharpens employees' skills and helps them achieve key goals, but it also improves engagement and retention of those employees. You know, earlier I mentioned the economic transformations Indiana experienced throughout the centuries. Through all of those shifts, one thing was constant: an ironclad commitment to higher education. Indiana's 1816 Constitution pledged that the state would create, quote, as soon as circumstances permit, a general system of education, end quote. In 1820, just 4 years later, the state saw the founding of the State University, which of course today we all know as home to the National College Football Champions. My notes say pause for applause and booing at the same time. The 20 years between 1827 and 1847 also saw the founding of Hanover, Wabash, what's now DePauw, Franklin, Earlham, and Notre Dame. In short, higher education has been great for Indiana. Equally important, it's been a foundational building block of American greatness. Beginning with the GI Bill after World War II and continuing into the 1960s and 70s with the National Defense Education Act, the Civil Rights Act, the Higher Education Act, and the creation of Pell Grants, the nation provided college opportunities for more Americans. Leaders of that post-war era believed that expanding college access would ensure that women, students from low-income backgrounds, students of color, first-generation students, and others would have the opportunity to succeed. We not only invested in the education of more Americans, we also ensured that our nation's colleges and universities were the global leaders in innovation and quality learning that met the needs of an ambitious nation and its equally ambitious people. In short, this country built the world's largest economy and strongest military and achieved global leadership in an array of scientific, technological, and cultural fields. Americans walked on the moon, added a decade to average lifespans, created today's knowledge economy, and saw rising standards of living for most of our citizens, and all of that was facilitated by higher education and its capacity to develop new knowledge and to transmit knowledge that serves both individuals and society. Now, we stand at another inflection point. AI will transform how we work. It will change tasks, industries, and expectations, but it will not change a fundamental truth. Our prosperity depends on developing human potential. The question is not whether AI will shape the future, it will. The question is whether we will shape AI's impact through smart investments in people. If we focus on human work, on durable skills, on accessible and affordable education, on strong partnerships between business and higher education, then this technological shift can expand opportunity rather than narrow it. Indiana has reinvented itself before. We've moved from farms to factories to advanced manufacturing and life sciences. Each time we succeeded because we believed in education, in work, and in the capacity of our people. That belief must guide us again. If we commit to preparing more Hoosiers and more Americans for meaningful human work, then AI will not diminish us, it will amplify us. And that is a future worth building. Thank you very much.
So let's just start with just building on some of your comments about some of the speculation or debate, or even fear in some cases, that at some point AI will be capable of real human-like intelligence. Talk more about what you think about that in the context of your remarks.
You know, there's this conversation that's been taking place over a number of years now about getting to this point of singularity, of artificial general intelligence, whatever you want to call it, where the machines actually have true human capabilities. And I think from a knowledge perspective, it's undeniably true. There is no scenario I can see with the way in which the exponential growth of generative AI has grown, that we will see that. At the same time, as I said in my remarks, I think our uniquely human traits are going to be really important for us to understand and to amplify, so that we work alongside the technology in a way where there is true complementarity between human and machine. There's lots of questions that are being explored right now about regulation of technology and a lot of other issues, and I think that's really, really important. But at the end of the day, if we have a human-centered approach to AI, I think we will be fine. We mentioned, and there's some handouts for you on the table, the engagement of Lumina Foundation in something called Humanity AI. This is an initiative involving about a dozen national foundations that are trying to participate in the development of new AI and the deployment of AI that puts people at the center. This is not intended to be a sort of counterbalance to everything else that's going on out there right now. It's intended to really make sure that as we develop AI, that its primary purpose is to help make life for humans better. And so that's the focus of this work, and that's an example of where I think if we focus on that, we will not be afraid of whether or not these machines have human intelligence. We'll see them as enhancing our shared well-being.
Great, thank you. We've got some good questions from the audience. One is regarding, there's a current major grant out in our ecosystem around higher education and AI, and the question is, and this is to apply to colleges and universities. So some fear AI adoption, as we talked about. The question is, what does responsible AI look like in the academic environment in your view?
Yeah, so AI is already being used pretty heavily in a variety of ways. It's being used in terms of the research enterprise of higher education, right? Because higher education does two really important things for society. It develops new knowledge and it transmits knowledge. And in the development of new knowledge, which higher education has been extraordinarily good at for society around the world, I think we're seeing a lot of the application of the AI in real time. On the teaching and learning side, it's sort of depended in a lot of ways in terms of the approach of that institution, the centering of technology in the curriculum itself, and I think we'll see some evolution of it over time. There's really interesting questions and lots of conversation going on. The people from the higher ed institutions in the room, I think, can confirm this, about when you should and should not use AI in the teaching and learning process, which I think is super important. I was part of a meeting a few weeks ago in which we talked about finding ways for colleges and universities to have AI-free zones, right? Where you would actually take certain classes or have certain times where literally there is no use of AI at all. It's entirely in-person, classroom-based. All of it's taking place in real time. There's no technology, inside or outside of the class, but not keeping the technology away from people, right? They will use the technology in other ways, but just making sure that there's AI-free time and AI applied time, because in the end you get more out of both of those.
Great. Kind of looking on the other end of the spectrum in education, so we talked a little bit about higher education. How can we train children, K through 12, on the use of AI and how to leverage AI without contributing to their decline in critical and analytical thinking?
So 5 years ago, when I did this book on human work, I was talking to the head of the robotics program at Berkeley. And he said to me 5 years ago, the dumbest thing we can do to children in their early years is to teach them how to code and how to use technology. He said, don't do it. It doesn't make sense. They've got plenty of time to do that. They're going to be able to do that over time. What you want is you want to build their foundational human skills at that point so that then they know how to use and adapt the technology over time. What the right point for that is, I'm not sure. But I think it's going to be really important for us to understand that we should be bringing our young people along in the technology arena in ways that they can understand it and grow with it. Many of today's young people, people under the age of 30 basically, are digital natives, right? They've always lived in a world where the technology is an important part of their existence. AI takes this to a whole new level. And I think taking the time to understand how we introduce it, what are the right ways to introduce it, and what are the ways in which we should hold it back is going to be really important. But that requires dialogue involving the educators,
the parents, and the policymakers that are making decisions about the allocation of resources that I don't see enough of in real time right now, frankly, and I hope we will do more of that.
Thank you. A couple of questions came in on the issue of AI and its impact on the environment, and some of the audience members wanted to know if you had any thoughts on that.
It's terrible for the environment. That's my short thought. AI is a serious problem in terms of water use and the way in which the AI systems need water for cooling in order to be able to make them run. And there's a real conundrum here about whether or not AI can help us solve those problems at some point. Which is an interesting sort of philosophical question about whether we'll ever get there. But I think it is a legitimate concern. We're dealing with it, as we know, in real time here in central Indiana with the development of all these data centers, et cetera. It's extremely challenging. Water use, and this is the primary area where it's coming up, is a big problem for much of the world, right? Mining is the #1 industry that uses water around the world today. We use a lot of water to mine precious minerals, et cetera. That's a big problem. So is the growth of AI. So are lots of other things in which we are wasting water. So thinking about the AI use and development, I think is going to be really important to keep those water supplies healthy long term. Indiana, many of you know, is a water positive state. We are a fortunate state because we have more water compared to other states than would be needed given our consumption patterns. But of course, that changes if you start ramping up water use and feeding that used water back into the water supply for human consumption. So I think it's a legitimate issue, something that I don't have a lot of expertise in, but I am worried about it, as are others.
Thank you. I'm going to move away from AI on a couple of the questions we received. One is the question regarding whether there's a gap between supply and demand specifically for skilled trades. And the question is a comment first that for many skilled trades is a better option or potentially a better opportunity. So the question is 75% college degree really needed to drive the economy?
Yeah, the goal isn't 75% college degrees, so we will explain that until we expire at Lumina Foundation. It's not 75% degrees. It's all forms of post-high school credentials. Degrees, certificates, certifications, quality credentials, credentials of value that demonstrate both that you get a higher wage as a result of the learning that you achieve, but also that you achieve these other benefits, job advancement, ability to contribute to your community, effective participant in the local economy, et cetera. All of these things are really important. So within that, degrees and other types of credentials are really important. Where we sort of draw the line at Lumina is that we believe that credentials, whether they are certificates or certifications or degrees, will continue to be the currency of the labor market for the foreseeable future. Meaning that employers are going to want to have some form of third-party validation that you know and can do something. And that's where these credentials come into being. So Lumina is in the both-and category. We like all post-high school credentials that demonstrate that they are credentials of value because we think that's what society needs. And so I just wrote a piece recently about the pitting of degree and non-degree credentials and how destructive that is in terms of the need for talent and the rising need for talent in the country. This is not a zero-sum game, folks. We need a lot more talent, and that talent is a continuum. But all of it really needs to be developed, almost all of it needs to be developed in post-high school learning contexts.
All right, round of applause. One of the audience members asks, when you're looking at higher education, do you have thoughts on the content? So more specifically, technical versus liberal arts, et cetera. Do you have any thoughts on the content that should be focused on?
Yeah, I think today, and 10 years ago and 20 years ago, it's always been important for every credential to reflect both generalizable knowledge and skills and content-specific knowledge and skills. And the technical side, what I would call the content-specific, doesn't matter whether it's graphic arts or chemistry or whatever it is. You need to know something about those topics, but you also need to know how to be a good analyst, a good critical thinker, a problem solver. You need to be a good interpersonal communicator. All of those things that I mentioned in my remarks about being caring and compassionate and ethical and all those things are growing in importance. And so the balance between the technical and the generalizable still exists. But I think going forward, adaptability is going to be really important. And it's why these issues around these generalizable skills are going to be more important and more important to human work. I will say, and there may be higher ed people in the room that want to run me out of the room when I say this, I no longer like the term liberal arts. Because there are people who are politically conservative in this country that think liberal arts means liberal. And because the word arts is not inclusive of, I think, a broader understanding of what the liberal arts really are. What liberal arts are is preparing people for complexity, for difference, for all of the sort of ways in which human beings actually have to interact and grow over time. We probably need a new brand, but we need to sort of focus on those as a really important part of what's happening going forward. We're going to continue to need to develop our technical and our human skills going forward. That may be the biggest message I hope you take away from this today, that this is really both of those going forward. That's what's going to be required for us to sort of stay ahead of the machines and be able to work alongside the machines to increase human prosperity.
Great, thank you. Question, taking us back to AI, the question is more specifically, where does K through 12 fit in your view in this conversation? Maybe more specifically, what can employers and people who can assist in our future K through 12 do?
Yeah, I'd say a couple things, and it does relate to the higher ed side. One is invest in equity in K-12 education, meaning invest in ensuring that everyone has access to the same kinds of technology so that our future labor force, our future leaders have all been exposed to the same kinds of things. That's a really important thing to instill, again, not at that really early age, but at a point where they're developing, particularly in middle school and beyond, that I think is going to be really important. The second is to reinforce, I think, at the K-12 level, more and more of these human skills that employers say that's what they want today. They want people who are really good at working in teams and who are, make good decisions and can be really good diagnosticians, not just people who can perform a task that is based on a specific, narrowly framed knowledge area. The reality of AI is that AI is going to develop more and more capacity to essentially have the sum of all knowledge in certain specific fields. So again, I'm going to offend people in the room here, but if you're a lawyer or accountant, you should be a little worried about AI right now, because the knowledge side of the law and accounting, AI is going to be able to handle. But it's not going to be able to handle the customer side. It's not going to be able to handle the sort of analytical side, the side that allows you to make the right kinds of ethical decisions, et cetera. So that's where I think we need to sort of push that back to the K-12 level and help people understand that these things are coming, that we want to prepare people not just for a narrow career trajectory, but a broader array of opportunities because of the exponential growth of AI.
Great. One more in the kind of space of kids, again, a little different twist though. How should we help prepare our kids, especially with so much screen time, to engage with AI but in a smart and safe way?
Keep them away from the screens more. That'd be good. We're parents. I'm a parent. And I think that's one easy thing to do is give them some balance. Don't try to take it away from them, but make sure that they use it in balance. I think that's really important. The second is make sure that the technology that they're using is technology you understand, and that you can actually assist them in the smart, ethical, appropriate use of that technology. I worry about parenting where it's like, yeah, I don't get it. I don't use it. I don't get it. you got to take the time and put the effort into actually using the technology yourself in order to be able to understand it. Social media has been a big part of this, obviously, in the last several years. But in particular, AI, I think it is really important for everyone to have a working knowledge of it. And by the way, this is how the technology is advancing so fast. If you tried ChatGPT this time last year, you will not recognize it now. It is growing that fast. And I told this story recently in another setting that every year at Lumina, I start the year with a sort of, the year ahead. And I actually wrote my remarks. And then over the course of a week, I had a debate with ChatGPT about whether what I was saying was good. Now, ChatGPT knows a lot about me because I've written 2 books, I've written thousands of articles, I've given lots of speeches, so it knows me. And in the course of doing that, what I realized is that the newest version of ChatGPT is actually a pretty good colleague. Am I going to get ChatGPT to originate content for me? I will not. I don't use it that way. I'm not getting it the way some people are using it to write the first draft, etc. I'm using it to help make me better. By the way, an interesting footnote on that story, Melina, is that at one point I said to ChatGPT, does this sound like me? And ChatGPT was like, yes, it does. And then it brought receipts. It was like, this phrase reminds me of something that you said in 1998. This reminds me of this. I was like, ooh. So it's very good. It's very good.
It's only going to get better. That's scary. This is a question from the audience, more of a global perspective. And I'm going to read this one because the handwriting is almost as bad as mine. And I can say that because mine's terrible. But for the first time, Harvard University was ranked only 3rd in global university rankings, primarily as a function of research outcomes. Chinese universities have outpaced the U.S. So what can organizations like Lumina do to help reverse the trend of divestment in higher education by the federal government?
All right, there's a lot embedded in that question. So let's start with rankings, which I studied earlier in my career, by the way. Rankings are only good as what the people who do the rankings decide is important. So you've got research-based rankings, you've got the U.S. News kind of rankings, you've got better rankings like the Washington Monthly and others that are more about the civic contributions, et cetera. So take these rankings with a grain of salt. These are not truth revealed. These reflect the biases of whoever develops the rankings. The research output of major American universities, meaning literally the top 100 research universities in the country, there's 4,000 colleges and universities, but about 80% of all the original research takes place in 100 institutions. And in those 100 institutions, it is true that research output is declining compared to Chinese universities. That is factually true. So we need to take seriously that. At the same time, we have a complex, diverse system of higher education in the United States, which is unlike what the Chinese or any other country have. And we've got to lean on the entire system of higher education to both produce new knowledge, that's the research side, and transmit that knowledge going forward. At Lumina, Lumina's not primarily in the production of knowledge side, we're in the transmission of knowledge side. And what we are doing is particularly trying to support those institutions, community colleges, public access four-year institutions, institutions with low endowments, et cetera, actually provide the greatest opportunities possible for the learners in our country. Most people go to those institutions. The media loves to focus on Harvard or whatever, Stanford, et cetera, but a tiny, tiny fraction of Americans go to the most selective institutions. In fact, less than 1 out of every 10 students in the United States goes to an institution that admits less than half of the students who apply. So 90% of the students in this country are essentially going to public, open access institutions, and we tend not to focus virtually at all in the public dialogue about those institutions.
We have time for 1 or 2 more. One, I think, is right in your strike zone, so hopefully this is a short one. But what can you say to assure families about the value of college?
I would say several things. The first is that it's not all the same. So one of the things that I think we're underscoring at Lumina is that institutions have to be more transparent about the value of their credentials. And so using these data systems that are growing out there now to assess what you believe is important in terms of the credentials that you think your children should achieve is really important. And so this idea of focusing on that is really critical. The second is, and I said this in my remarks, higher ed has to transform itself. It has no choice at this moment, I think, because of declining resources, because of the increasing demands on the system, et cetera, and many institutions are going through that process now. But transparency is going to be really important. Investment, particularly in some of these new ideas that we've been talking about today, is going to be incredibly important. Ensuring that people do have access to these more generalizable learning opportunities, what I used to call liberal arts, is going to be really important. Because I think that's where a lot of the growth is going to be in these sort of broader learning opportunities. But I think this is a two-way street. Society's got to invest, but higher ed's got to transform, and that means that we've all sort of got to lean into this higher ed redesign project.
Okay, in our closing minute that we have, this is a good aspirational one. Given our fragile state of democracy, how can we best leverage AI to advance a stronger republic?
Higher education has always been about the foundations of our democracy, and I've long argued that the strength of education is rooted in our democratic traditions. It's really what's most important about our ability to live in a free society, our ability to speak freely, to be able to express ourselves in a way that matters as people in a democratic society. So higher education and democracy, higher education and local media, higher education and civil society, these things all go together. It's really important that we focus on that role, that civic role of higher education. Yes, higher education needs to prepare people for jobs and improving the way in which they participate in the economy, but it also needs to do a good job of preparing them for life in a democratic society, and that needs to be an increasing focus of what we do in higher education going forward.
Great. Well, one more round of applause for Jamie. Thank you so much.